So hi everyone and welcome to another We Are Sunderland briefing in association with our sponsors, the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. Myself, Scott Wilson and Dom Shaw are in place and we're going to preview tomorrow's home game against Borough. Is it a derby? Is it not a derby? Either way, it's a big old game. It feels like Sunderland's biggest of the season so far. And it's going to be quite an occasion at the Stadium of Light, isn't it, Dom?
It is, yeah, it is, isn't it? I think, like you say, regardless of kind of what your views are on the fixture, it's a big game, isn't it? And there's going to be a big game feel about it. There's been that big game feel about it in the build-up. And I think for different reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into, both teams could do with a positive result, really. Or not could do with a positive result, but would undoubtedly benefit from a positive result ahead of what has the look of a tricky run of fixtures for both teams. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, we'll get into Sunderland's team news. We'll talk about how the game might pan out. We'll have a little bit of chat about Borough and what to expect from them. A little bit of housekeeping first. If you're watching on YouTube, then please subscribe, drop us anything in the comments you want us to talk about in future vids or any thoughts on the derby and what might be in store. If you're listening on one of the various podcast platforms, then rate and review. And again, get in touch with us. Let us know your thoughts on all things Sunderland. Right, Dom, so let's get to it. You were up yesterday at the Academy with Regis Le Bris. And the big news, obviously, is that Dan Ballard is going to be fit to play in tomorrow's game. We're recording this on Friday. So, I mean, it goes without saying that is a massive boost and something that didn't necessarily look likely when he was hobbling off right at the end of the game down at Plymouth and obviously leaving the ground on crutches and all of that. It's a big boost for a game like this to have Ballard available, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Because he is Sunderland's first choice centre-half. And for all we clearly didn't know, we were left guessing after that Plymouth game. You're struck by the sight of him, aren't you? Hobbling off in crutches, protective boot, obviously being helped off the pitch by physios. So you do fear the worst. And I think all expectations really was that Chris Mepham was going to have to come in to make his debut. And I suspect he'll have seen that as a big opportunity to come in and take his chance. But that way now looks like going on because it'd be staggering, really, wouldn't it, if Ballard and O'Nien wasn't the back two. And we wrote a piece, didn't we, looking ahead to the game earlier this week. And we asked whether there was going to be any team selection surprises. And from a Sunderland perspective, I don't think there is now. Do you? I think the team, even though Sunderland are coming into this on the back of a defeat, I think the team picks itself.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, had Alan Brown been available, maybe there was a question there, but I still think that Le Bris would have gone with Rig, Job, and Neil as his midfield three. So I fully expect that to be the team now with Brown obviously not available. The back four surely picks itself. Hume, O'Nien, Ballard, and Sirkin. Clearly, Patterson plays in goal. It's hard to see why it wouldn't be Robertson, Mundle, either side of Mayenda, isn't it? I mean, like you say, it feels like at the moment it's a very settled Sunderland team. And yes, they got beat last time out, but I think the manner of the performance and the fact that it was away from home and it was a game that could really have gone either way, A, means you don't have to make wholesale changes, and B, while I suppose Wilson Isidore's maybe knocking on the door a bit, there's no one at the minute really putting their hand up and saying, I need to be in this team, is there?
No, I was going to say Isidore's probably the only one who you think at some point might he come in just to maybe take Mayenda out the firing line, give Mayenda a bit of a rest, not to expect kind of too much too soon from Mayenda. That's what Le Bris said himself, didn't it, in the summer, although he rolled back slightly on those comments at a press conference you were at a couple of weeks ago, didn't he? But Le Bris yesterday was saying that Isidore's ready. We know that the head coach eases signings in. Jan Paveda, for example, we didn't see for 3-4 weeks before he was involved. We haven't seen any of the deadline day signings yet, although a couple of them were on the bench last weekend. But Isidore's ready. But Le Bris made a point of praising Mayenda for his performance last week and saying that even though he didn't score, I still really liked a lot of what he did. So I suspect he'll stay in. And the other thing that was interesting on Mayenda, he was asked about Mundle and basically why there's a trend now that wingers are scoring so many goals in the Championship. You think of Jack Clark last season, Somerville at Leeds, and he said it's because the central channel is closed and often there isn't the space in there, and therefore the danger kind of comes from the flanks. So I think what he was trying to get out there is Mayenda's performances won't be judged just on goals. Often, as he says, with Mundle, you kind of make the space and do the work that creates the openings for others. And we were talking about earlier this week, weren't we? Mundle's very much the danger man when it comes to goals at the minute for Sunderland. And I think when Borough have done the prep for the game this week, shackling and keeping Mundle under wraps will have been one of the priorities, won't it?
I mean, yeah, if we talk about key men for the game, then, I mean, just the fact he scored 3 and 3 and, it's clearly really important to the way Sunderland are playing in a minute. It feels like Mundle, he's going to be a key performer in this game because, listen, I don't think any of us are saying he's the new Jack Clark or he's going to, be a like-for-like replacement. But goodness me, he's made a decent start of stepping in there, hasn't he? And you feel that if Sunderland are going to win this game, then, Mundle and Roberts are probably going to be important figures because, like you say, yes, Mayenda is perfectly capable of scoring against Borough. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But a lot of Sunderland's threat, you'd think, is going to come from those wide positions.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting battles on the flanks, isn't there? Because Mundle is going to come up against Luke Ayling, who doesn't have the pace of the Sunderland winger, but is among the most streetwise full-backs in the Championship and knows every trick in the book, doesn't he? And he also has played a lot of football with Isaiah Jones in front, and Jones was a wing-back under Chris Wilder, so he's well aware of the importance of kind of defensive discipline as well as letting go going forward. So he'll provide the cover. And Ayling Jones versus Sirkin and Mundle is a mouth-watering battle, really. But then on the other side, Pat Roberts, who's obviously playing well, will come up against Neto Borges, who signed for Borough late in the summer window and has only played a couple of games and had a bit of a difficult home debut against Preston last week. But I don't think he was helped by the fact that he had Finn Azaz in front, who's more of a number 10 playing on the left rather than a left-sided player. If Azaz continues in the team at Sunderland on Saturday, then I think a lot will have been made of the fact that for all Azaz is extremely dangerous going forward. I think he's had more shots on goal than any other Championship player this season. He has to make sure Borges has ample cover and support as well.
And I mean, listen, we don't need to delve into the whole derby debate, but I think we accept, or I think everybody accepts that it's a game that's going to have a little bit more edge than pretty much any other home game Sunderland are likely to play this season. Now, the last 2 games against Borough at the Stadium of Light, there's been red cards. 2 seasons ago, it was Dale Fry, and Sunderland took full advantage of that and won the game. Last season, it was obviously Dan Neil in very controversial circumstances, and Borough more than took advantage of that in the second half to win the game. Both sides are going to need to keep 11 players on the pitch tomorrow. That's a first and foremost, isn't it? And while who knows which way the game goes, there's going to be a big atmosphere. It's going to have an edge. It's going to feel that little bit more on it than like I say, a lot of other games this season. That brings a certain pressure and a need to keep yourself under control, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And Le Bris was saying that yesterday, because for all Le Bris had said he doesn't think Sunderland supporters see this as a specific derby. He did talk about it being an interesting fixture and did talk about the kind of big game feel around the fixture. And he then talked about the need to just play the game and not the occasion, because those sending-offs have clearly had a huge impact on the outcome in the last 2 games at the Stadium of Light, haven't they? And what would be interesting, we were chatting about this earlier this week, wouldn't we? I'd quite like to see just a level playing field and how the game plays out tomorrow. Because I think it's an interesting game and it'd be nice to kind of come away. I think tomorrow will tell us a lot about both teams, and I think it'd be nice to come away with a kind of feeling that, we've seen 2 good teams. I think the 2 good teams this season go at it toe-to-toe rather than the outcome being swayed by a red card or something like that. But that's clearly something that Le Bris is going to be stressing to his players, just to stay calm, really. And Le Bris will probably be the calmest person inside the Stadium of Light on Saturday, won't he? But he was interesting, I thought, yesterday. He was talking about how he responds to defeat, and he was asked whether kind of the reaction to a defeat is the same as it is victory. And ordinarily managers say, don't they? Yeah, we quickly put it behind us, blah, blah, blah. But he was said, no, there is a different taste, I think he said, in our mouths in the days that followed. And he said, like, look, it doesn't have an impact on the mood around the place, but it'd be lying if he said it was the same as it was following a victory. So it was the first setback of the season. And it is, although we talked about earlier this week, there were so many positives to take from the defeat last week. It's still the first indication we're going to get of how Sunderland react to any form of setback.
And the fact that, like you say, it's the first time they're coming off a league defeat this season. And the fact that, as we've alluded to, it's Borough, it's a full house on Ion. It's going to have it's going to have a feel to it. Do you think we'll learn a bit more about Le Bris and the way that he's going to handle these kind of things? Because, again, we have, it's very early days in his development. And I think we've all been massively impressed by what we've seen so far. But this is another challenge and another kind of set of circumstances he's got to show he can deal with, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I thought his press conference was good on Thursday. And he certainly, like, I don't mean this in a patronising way, but you can see that his confidence has grown in those surroundings, which is understandable, isn't it? Kind of when you first come in, speaking in a new language, in a different language, at a new club, I guess you're bound to be a bit more cautious, aren't you? But you can tell that his confidence is growing in that setup now. And I think it is a test, isn't it? The first real test this season was clearly that Burnley game, which Sunderland negotiated extremely well. This feels like the next big step from that, doesn't it? And we've talked previously, haven't we, about this, how this next run of games is going to tell us a lot about Sunderland. But I think this will. It was interesting talking about Borough as well, and how he was saying they're very structured. We know how they're going to play, basically. We know how they're going to play. We know how they can hurt us. We know what we've got to do to stop them hurting us. But knowing that and actually going out and doing it are two very different things.
So how will Borough play, do you think? What are Borough's kind of threats that Sunderland have to be aware of? And what will Borough be coming to the Stadium of Light thinking, this is the way we're going to hurt Sunderland?
Well, we've got the Borough probable team running across the bottom there. And the defence, you've got Rav Vandenberg, who's likely to be missing. So George Edmondson, who's a deadline day signing, is expected to come in there. The midfield, you would expect Aidan Morris to come back in. He was rested last week, but he's been really... He's
the American lad that they signed in the summer.
Yeah, and he's been good, hasn't he, since he's come in. It's that forward four, I think. And Carrick has so many options in those areas, doesn't he? But those four are the four that he started last week against Preston. Jones on the right, Tommy Conway, 10, Finnazaz left, and Lartilath obviously up front. Tommy Conway signed as a striker, really, didn't he? That's where he played most of his football for Bristol City, but he's settled in as number 10 and looks comfortable in that role. And Carrick obviously has previous when it comes to turning strikers into number 10s. That's what he did with Chuba Akpom, who was player of the season in the Championship a couple of seasons ago. But Le Bris talked about how Borough are very narrow. Borough are narrow, and they'll go through the central channels, as he said. And Conway has been very central, no pun intended, hasn't he, to the way Borough plays since he was brought into the team. Finnazaz starts off the left but drifts inside. That said, Luke Ayling doesn't need any opportunity to bomb forward down the right, does he? Isaiah Jones hasn't been at his best yet. He's under a bit of pressure because Ben Doak's arrived. Marcus Force is back in training, but he's still been effective at times and won the penalty late on against Portsmouth that helped Borough get a draw. So although Le Bris pointed to Borough playing central, they do have various attacking threats, didn't he? What Le Bris did say is words to the effect of, there's kind of no random element to Borough's attack. It's all very structured. So we know what to expect. But like knowing what to expect in football and doing something about it is two very different things, hasn't it? What you would say about Borough, though, I mean, we both watch a bit of Borough, obviously, and for all of that, created loads of chances, no problems creating chances. They've lacked a cutting edge, haven't they, so far this season? They've struggled to kill teams off.
Yeah, they have. They haven't clicked into gear really yet. It's interesting because we've been talking through all week. Obviously, we've been previewing the game and talking around it and stuff, and chatting about where the two relative teams are at the moment and what their realistic ambitions for the season should be. Now, I think most of us, even just in the first month of the season, have perhaps nudged our thoughts and hopes on what Sunderland might achieve this season upwards a bit because there was so much uncertainty in the summer. I think my view on it is that I think that if you're talking about the two clubs as best 11, I think Sunderland have the better best 11. But I think Borough have quite a bit more squad depth right across the pitch. So Sunderland, I think we would all accept that if Sunderland get injuries to 2 or 3 key players or 2 or 3 players in the same position, they're potentially going to be in trouble this season. Whereas I don't necessarily think that's the case with Borough. But I think if you put the two best 11s up against each other, I think Sunderland have the better 11.
Well, we did the combined 11, and I know they're a nonsense, aren't they? But we did like a variation of that this week, didn't we? And it's hard to keep. So Patterson is in, I think.
I think he's in, yeah.
Defence, it's hard to keep Trey Hume, Dan Ballard, Dennis Serkin. In midfield, I mean, midfield's stacked, isn't it? Because you think Borough have got Hayden Hackney, Aidan Morris, and Johnny Howson. But then you've got Chris Rigg, Dan Neil, Joe Bellingham, and then Romain Mundle scored 3 and 3. Patrick Roberts is showing signs of it. So, I mean, I guess it all depends which side you're coming at it from, doesn't it? And you could easily make the same case on the Borough side. But Sunderland have got plenty of players who would get into every championship team. I was going to say most, but I'd say every championship team, wouldn't you? The question is, like you say, it's the depth in it. What if Mayenda gets injured? What if Trey Hume gets injured? What if Dennis Serkin gets injured? What if Romain Mundle gets injured? You could go on, couldn't you? And as you say, whereas with Borough, well, if Finn Azaz gets injured, you've got Riley McGree to come in. If Isaiah Jones gets injured, you've got Ben Doak. If Latte Lath, you can put Tommy Conway up front. You've got Rav Vandenberg, Dale Fry, Darrell Lenihan all out. Johnny Howson hasn't played any league football yet. So I think that's the difference. I fancy them both to be in the top 6 come the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. And I think probably, more so with both of them now, even than when it started, because I think, they've both shown that they're more than capable of doing that. And I think, we kind of said, didn't we, that it felt like this championship was maybe not going to have a runaway team and maybe it was going to be easier to get into the top 6 this season. Well, I think Luton is starting to click into gear. Leeds are starting to click into gear, but it does feel like that there is an opportunity there. And you'd like to think that, whatever happens tomorrow, Borough and Sunderland are going to be bang there as part of it.
And I think what we have seen from the first weeks of the season is there's nothing really to fear this season, which we thought might be the case before a ball was kicked. Then Burnley steamrolled a couple of teams, and you're thinking, oh God, are they going to do what a couple of teams did last season? I think Sunderland did every other championship team a favour when they beat Burnley, because straight away it just kind of popped that bubble of invincibility, didn't it? And made teams believe that, well, they're beatable. West Brom are top now. I don't think West Brom are, on any given day, I'd back Sunderland to beat West Brom. I think it's really even at the top this year, which is fascinating, really, isn't it? Clearly, it's going to come down to consistency, and Sunderland are young, but they're not really inexperienced, are they? Although they're a young team, they've got plenty of players. Dan Neil, in football terms, is young, but Christ almighty, how many games has he played already? So,
I think if you look at the team Sunderland are going to put out tomorrow, then the age thing is a little bit of a red herring, really. Like I say, the worry with Sunderland is that below that there is a lack of experience. There's a lack of, I would argue, quality in a lot of areas, which I don't think we're saying anything new there, are we? That's the worry with Sunderland. But as I keep coming back to, I agree. On any given day, Sunderland can beat any team in the Championship, no bother, and they can certainly beat Middlesbrough at home. And luckily they're going into it with pretty much every player that you'd want them to have available. So they should be giving it a right good go.
I think it goes back to what you said at the start, really, when we were talking about the team. The Sunderland team picks itself, really, which says as much about those on the bench as it does in the team, doesn't it? Whereas, when we were doing the probable teams beforehand and when we've had a chat this week, there's a lot more to consider, I think, when doing Borough's probable side for tomorrow than there is Sunderland's. And the other thing, and I know Middlesbrough got thumped at home to Stoke in the second round of the Carabao Cup, but that came after a win at Leeds. But we saw how Sunderland played in the cup game at Preston, that the second string isn't really strong enough, is it, at the minute? But then again, you've got players like Adil Al-Shish and Abdullah Bar to come back in. Le Bris said on Thursday that they can still play a part, and they're players who can be effective at this level, aren't they?
And people like Alexic, who we haven't seen yet.
Samed to come back. We don't know much about Isidore. Mepham's a Wales international, so Elise to come back. So yeah, there is that. But the team does pick itself largely at the minute, doesn't it? Other than that midfield.
So what are we thinking then? It's neck on the block time. We're both going to be there tomorrow, reporting for We Are Sunderland. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm having a nosy outside at my back garden fence, and after this, I'm going to go and sit on it, I think, because yeah, I'm going to go draw. You can make a case. What I don't think there'll be a comfortable winner like there has been the last couple of times these sides have met. Stadium, like, unless there's another sending off that clearly impacts the outcome of the game. If there isn't, if it finishes 11 versus 11, I think it could go either way, a goal either way. So with that in mind, I'll sit on the fence and go 1-1 draw. What about you?
Is there much room on that fence? Yeah, I've been saying all week, I think there'll be goals. If I was having a bet in this game, then over 2.5 goals would be my bet all day long, because I think it'll be open. I think both teams at the minute are better going forward than they are defensively, even though Sunderland kept all those clean sheets at the start of the season. I think that just by the fact that there'll be such a big atmosphere and all of that, I think that both teams will look to be on the front foot. I think they'll go forward. I think it could be a classic kind of this way and that game where, you know, goals are traded and various teams are in the ascendancy at various stages. I'm going to go 2-2. And yeah, my most confident pick would be that there'll be goals in the game and a fair few of them. I'm like you. If assuming that there's not a sending off or something that really adversely affects the game, then I have really high hopes that it's going to be a really good, entertaining, watchable game. And I think they're two very, very closely matched teams. So that's why I'm going to go 2-2. Just
looking at those fixtures across the bottom, would a draw be a good result, do you think, for Sunderland?
Yeah, I don't think it would be a bad one. I mean, obviously, Sunderland are at home, so ideally you want to win your home games. And, you know, if you're going to get promoted or finish in the top 6, then you're going to have to win the majority of your home games. But Sunderland do have a slight bit of a cushion in the way that they've started the season. And I think to take something from the game would not be a disaster, would it? Let's put it like that. It'd be, you know, listen, it depends what happens in the game. If you go 2-0 down and fight back to draw 2-2 and have a stirring second half comeback, then you go out with it on a high, don't you? There's different ways to draw a game, but you know, ideally Sunderland will go in wanting to win it and are more than capable of winning it. But I don't think a draw would be a disaster. I don't think it'd be a disaster for either team, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, at a fairly early stage of the season.
Let's see. Well, enjoy it if you're going. If you're not going and you're sat at home watching it, enjoy the game. Do get in touch if there's anything you want us to discuss on We Are Sunderland briefings going forward. As we said at the start, just a thanks to our partners, the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians, and congratulations to our winners of the tickets for tomorrow's game. We had 2 pairs of tickets that we gave away, and those winners have been notified, so they'll be there at the Stadium of Light on Saturday, hoping for a Sunderland win. Do subscribe, as Scott said at the start, if you haven't already. If you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate and review. Enjoy the game this weekend, and we'll be back next week to look back on the Borough game on our next We Are Sunderland briefing. Take care.